Her body collapsed at his feet like a fallen prayer. Soot covered her trembling hands as she grabbed his ankle, ash streaking down her tear-stained face. Her voice cracked through smoke-damaged vocal cords, desperate and raw. "My mama is trapped in the fire. Please sir, she's dying in there." The street went dead silent. Passers-by froze mid-step. Car engines idled. Every eye on that Detroit sidewalk turned toward one man. But the stranger whose expensive Italian shoes she now clutched was no ordinary man. He was Capon Maurizio, the most feared Mafia boss in Detroit. A man who had built an empire on ice-cold calculation and ruthless efficiency. A man who, for 15 years, had shown mercy to no one. And what he did next would shock the entire city. Stay with me until the end because this story will leave you speechless. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video. Hit subscribe and comment where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. It's a cold Wednesday night in downtown Detroit, November 1989. Capon Maurizio had just stepped out of La Corona Nera, his upscale Italian restaurant, into the crisp autumn air. His black town car idled at the curb, his driver ready, his bodyguards flanking him on both sides. At 49 years old, Capon was sharp-featured with eyes like black ice and a presence that made grown men step aside on the sidewalk. His tailored suit cost more than most people earned in a year. He'd just finished a meeting with his captains about territory expansion. Business as usual in his precisely controlled criminal empire. For 30 years, Capon had ruled Detroit's underworld with mathematical precision. Emotion he believed was weakness. Sentiment got you killed. He'd learned that lesson 15 years ago when his younger brother burned to death while Capon arrived 3 minutes too late to save him. He'd vowed never to feel that helpless again. Never to let his heart compromise his judgment. Until tonight. Until a desperate waitress from his own restaurant came running out the door, covered in ash from a fire 3 blocks away, and collapsed at his feet on that cold Detroit sidewalk, shattering the walls he'd spent 15 years building around his frozen heart. Capon looked down at the woman crumpled at his feet. Her brown eyes, wide with terror and desperate hope, locked onto his through the soot streaking her face. Her fingers trembled against his ankle, and he felt the heat of ash still clinging to her uniform. Behind her, orange flames painted the night sky 3 blocks away, and sirens wailed in the distance. Something shifted inside him. Something he'd buried so deep he'd forgotten it existed. 15 years ago, on a night just as cold as this one, Capon's phone had rung at 2:47 a.m. His younger brother Dante's voice crackled through the line, already thick with smoke and panic. "They locked me in, Capon. They set it on fire. I can't breathe." Capon had driven like a madman through Chicago's streets, running every red light, his heart pounding against his ribs. He'd arrived at the warehouse in 3 minutes. 3 minutes that might as well have been 3 hours. The building was already engulfed, flames shooting through the roof. Firefighters held him back as he screamed his brother's name into the inferno. They found Dante's body the next morning. That night taught Capon everything he needed to know about survival. Feeling costs you everything. Love makes you vulnerable. Vulnerability gets exploited. Exploitation gets you killed. He'd rebuilt himself from the ashes of his grief. A man of pure calculation, ice where there used to be fire, logic where there used to be heart. But now, staring down at Nikki Burke's soot-covered face, hearing her voice crack with the same desperate terror he'd heard in his brother's final words, Capon felt the ice begin to crack. Her raw, unfiltered need to save her mother mirrored the helplessness that had haunted him for 15 years. The same helplessness that had turned him into a man who felt nothing. For the first time since that terrible night, Capon Maurizio felt something more powerful than his carefully constructed control. He felt the chance at redemption. Where? Capon's voice cut through the shocked silence on the sidewalk, surprisingly gentle for a man known for his ice-cold commands. He reached down and helped Nikki to her feet, steadying her trembling frame. How long ago? Nikki gasped for breath, her lungs still raw from the smoke she'd already inhaled just getting close enough to see the flames. Riverside Apartments, 3 blocks east. Maybe 10 minutes ago. Her words tumbled out in a desperate rush. I was working the dinner shift when someone ran in screaming. My mama, Karen Burke, she's on the 4th floor. She has arthritis. She can't move fast. She can't. Her voice broke and Capon's jaw tightened. 4th floor. The memory of his brother's warehouse flashed through his mind. The height of those flames, the impossible heat. 2 men, Nikki continued, wiping ash from her eyes. The neighbors saw them running from the building right before it started. White guys in dark clothes. One had a red baseball cap. Her hands clenched into fists. That developer, Marcus Webb, he's been trying to push everyone out for months. Threatening us. Harassing the tenants. He wants to tear it down and build condos. The pieces clicked into place in Capon's mind with cold precision. Arson for profit. Intimidation masked as accidents. The kind of calculated cruelty that made his blood run cold. Not because it was violent, but because it was cowardly. Boss. Uncle Sal stepped forward, his weathered face creased with concern. His hand touched Capon's arm, his voice low and urgent. This isn't our concern. We have the meeting with the unions in an hour. We can't. Capon turned his head slowly, his black eyes meeting Sal's with an intensity that made his consigliere take a step back. The look said everything without words. Then Capon spoke, his voice quiet but absolute. It is now. He'd spent 15 years building an empire on the principle that emotion was weakness. 15 years believing that caring about anything beyond power and profit would destroy him. But standing on that cold sidewalk with Nicky Burke's desperate eyes burning into his soul and the orange glow of flames painting the night sky, Capon Maurizio made a choice that defied everything he'd become. He chose to act with his heart. Capon moved with the swift, commanding authority that had built his empire, but this time something was different. His voice carried an urgency his inner circle had never heard before, raw and unfiltered, stripped of its usual calculated calm. Yo, get the car. Now. He snapped his fingers at his chief enforcer, a mountain of a man who'd seen Capon order executions without blinking. Call Fire Chief Morrison. Tell him Capon Maurizio needs access to the Riverside scene. Tell him I'm calling in every favor he owes me. Joe's eyes widened for a fraction of a second before he pulled out his phone and moved toward the idling town car. Capon turned back to Nikki, his hands gripping her shoulders to steady her shaking frame. His questions came rapid-fire, precise as a surgeon's scalpel. The exact address. What floor? Which apartment number? Would your mother go to the windows or stay by the door? Does she have a phone? Can she get low to avoid the smoke? For 17 Riverside Drive, Nikki gasped, trying to focus through her panic. 4th floor, apartment 4C. She'd go to the window. She always said if there was a fire, get to the window. But the arthritis, her knees. Good. The window gives us a target. Capon released her and wheeled toward Uncle Sal, his finger jabbing the air with each command. Sal, dispatch Marco and Tommy. I want every witness who saw those 2 men. Get descriptions, names, which direction they ran. Everything. And find out where Marcus Webb is right now. Sal opened his mouth to protest, then closed it. He'd never seen this side of Capon, not in 30 years. He nodded and pulled out his phone. Capon did something then that shocked everyone on that sidewalk. He took Nikki's arm, gently, almost protectively, and personally walked her to his private car. His hand steadied her shaking shoulders as he guided her into the back seat, then slid in beside her. His voice dropped low, and he looked directly into her terrified eyes with an intensity that felt like an oath carved in stone. Your mother will not die tonight. I give you my word. The car doors slammed shut, and the town car roared into the Detroit night, chasing flames and redemption. The town car tore through Detroit streets, weaving through traffic with practiced efficiency. In the back seat, Nikki's breathing slowly steadied, though her hands still trembled in her lap. She stole glances at the man beside her, this imposing figure who radiated controlled power like heat from a furnace. She'd served him dinner 100 times, always keeping her eyes down, always aware of the whispers about who he really was. Detroit's most notorious crime lord. A man people feared to even mention by name. And yet here he was, racing toward a fire to save a woman he'd never met. She didn't understand it. But right now she didn't need to. They rounded the corner onto Riverside Drive and Nikki's breath caught in her throat. The apartment building, her home, was being devoured. Flames consumed the upper floors, shooting through windows in angry orange torrents. Thick black smoke billowed into the night sky. Firefighters swarmed the scene, their hoses spraying water that seemed pathetically small against the inferno. Residents huddled on the street in pajamas and coats thrown over nightgowns, their faces lit by the terrible glow, shock and terror etched into every expression. Police barriers held back the growing crowd of onlookers. The moment Capon's town car pulled up, everything changed. Fire Chief Morrison, a barrel-chested man with silver hair and soot on his face, immediately broke away from his command post and approached. His eyes met Capon's through the window and something unspoken passed between them. A debt being called in. With a subtle nod from Capon, the police barrier opened like the parting of a sea. Capon stepped out, Nikki stumbling after him, and Morrison's face was grim. Fourth floor is fully engulfed. We can't get crews up the interior stairwell safely. It collapsed 10 minutes ago. Evacuation is nearly complete, but we have one unaccounted for. Apartment 4C. That's her apartment. Nikki's voice broke, raw and desperate. That's my mama. A firefighter standing nearby shook his head, his face streaked with sweat and ash. We're trying to reach her from the exterior ladder, but the smoke's too dense. We can't see anything up there. Capon stared up at the fourth floor at the window of apartment 4C where flames licked at the edges. Nikki watched his profile and she saw something shift in his eyes, something cold and calculating melting into something else entirely. A decision being made that would change everything. Against every objection, from his men, from firefighters, from logic itself, Capon Maurizio did the unthinkable. He shrugged off his expensive Italian jacket, letting it fall to the ash-covered pavement. His hands reached out and took a helmet and oxygen mask from a stunned firefighter who was too shocked to protest. Gio lunged forward, his voice sharp with alarm. "Boss, you can't." But Capon was already moving toward the entrance, his shoes crunching over broken glass and debris. Two firefighters exchanged panicked glances and rushed in behind him, knowing they couldn't let Detroit's most feared Mafia boss die on their watch. The moment Capon crossed the threshold, hell swallowed him whole. Smoke thick as tar choked the air. Heat pressed against him like a physical force, stealing the breath from his lungs even through the mask. The roar of flames consuming wood and steel drowned out everything else. A living, hungry sound that wanted to devour him too. But Capon's instincts, honed from 30 years of navigating dangerous situations, of walking into rooms where death waited, guided him forward. Fourth floor. Apartment 4C. He took the stairs two at a time, the firefighters shouting directions behind him, their flashlights cutting through the black smoke. He found the apartment. The door was hot to the touch. He kicked it in with a force born of desperation, and there, crumpled near the window, was Karen Burke. Unconscious. She tried to signal for help, her hand still reaching toward the glass before the smoke had overwhelmed her. Capon didn't hesitate. He lifted Karen into his arms, feeling her weight settle against his chest. Then the pain hit, searing white-hot agony as burns tore across his forearms where his shirt sleeves had burned away, exposing skin to the flames licking at the walls. "Move. Move." One firefighter screamed, and they guided him back through the partially collapsed hallway, through smoke so thick he could taste it even through the mask, through heat that felt like walking through the sun itself. They emerged from the building and the crowd erupted in gasps and stunned silence. Detroit's most feared Mafia boss, Capon Maurizio, the man of ice and calculation, staggered into the firelight carrying an elderly black woman to safety. His arms blistered and bleeding. His white shirt scorched black. His face streaked with soot. And in his eyes, for the first time in 15 years, something other than ice. Humanity. The emergency room at Detroit General erupted into controlled chaos the moment Capon carried Karen Burke through the doors. Nurses and doctors swarmed, transferring her onto a gurney. "Severe smoke inhalation, possible burns," a paramedic shouted. "Female, 64, unresponsive." They rushed her toward the trauma wing while another team descended on Capon, trying to guide him to a treatment area for his own injuries. His forearms were blistered and raw, second-degree burns that would scar. But he waved them off with a sharp gesture, his eyes tracking Karen's gurney until it disappeared behind swinging doors. "I'm not leaving until she's stable," he said, his voice hoarse from smoke but absolute in its command. A doctor, young, nervous, clearly recognizing who Capon was, nodded quickly. "Of course, Mr. Maurizio. We'll keep you updated." Capon made a phone call, his words brief and efficient. Within 20 minutes, Karen and Nikki had a private room on the secured top floor, with Capon's men stationed at every entrance. Money, he told the hospital administrator, was no object whatsoever. The best care. The best doctors. Whatever it took. While medical staff finally treated his burns, wrapping his forearms in clean white gauze, Capon watched through the window as Nikki sat vigil at her mother's bedside. Karen was on oxygen, her face obscured by the mask, monitors beeping steadily. Nikki held her hand, shoulders shaking with silent tears. Capon stepped into the hallway and Uncle Sal was waiting, his weathered face grim in the fluorescent light. "We found witnesses," Sal said quietly, glancing around to ensure they were alone. "Danny Matches, Kellerman and Rick Torres. Northside crew." Capon's jaw tightened. The Northside crew were small-time criminals. Drug runners, extortionists, street thugs. They shouldn't have had the nerve to operate this boldly in his territory without permission. Who gave them clearance? Sal's expression darkened. "That's the problem, boss. I'm hearing whispers that someone inside our organization gave them the green light. Someone high up." The words hung in the sterile hospital air like a knife waiting to drop. "Someone's making moves against you," Sal continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "This fire, it wasn't just about the developer. It was a test. To see if you were still strong enough to respond. To see if you'd gone soft." Capon stared through the window at Nikki and her mother, his burned arms throbbing beneath the bandages. His empire was being challenged from within. Someone had orchestrated this, expecting him to ignore it. They'd miscalculated badly. 2 hours later, Dr. Sarah Chin emerged from the intensive care unit, pulling down her surgical mask. Her face was tired but relieved. "Mrs. Burke is stable. The smoke inhalation was severe, but we got her in time. She's a strong woman, she'll recover fully." Nikki collapsed against the wall, her hands covering her face as sobs of relief shook her entire body. She turned to Capon, who stood watching with his bandaged arms crossed over his chest, and threw herself at him, her voice breaking. Thank you. Thank you. You're an angel sent by God. You saved her. You saved my mama." Capon's hand awkwardly patted her shoulder, unsure how to receive gratitude he didn't feel he deserved. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "Stay with her tonight. My men will keep you safe." He walked away before she could say anything else, his shoes echoing down the empty hallway. The hospital chapel was small and dimly lit, wooden pews facing a simple altar. Capon sat in the back row, his burned arms resting on his knees, his head bowed. He wasn't praying, he didn't believe in God anymore, not after Dante, but he needed the silence to think. To process what was happening to his carefully constructed empire. The chapel door opened. Joe's massive frame filled the doorway, his face grim in the candlelight. "We got them, boss. Danny Matches, Kellerman and Rick Torres. Marco and the boys picked them up an hour ago." Capon looked up, his black eyes sharp. "And?" Gio stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His voice dropped to a whisper as if the walls themselves might betray them. "They talked. Said they were hired by Marcus Webb to clear the building. Standard intimidation, they thought. But Webb's protection, his guarantee that no one would come after them, that came from inside our family." Capon's jaw clenched. "Who?" "Victor Castellano." The name hit like a physical blow. Victor, the Viper Castellano. His underboss. His second in command for 8 years. Ambitious, calculating, always watching for weakness. "Victor's been orchestrating a coup," Gio continued, his voice tight with anger. "He thought you'd grown weak with age. The fire was designed to expose you. If you ignored it, you looked cruel, lost respect from the streets. If you responded emotionally, you looked soft, vulnerable to the captains." Capon sat perfectly still, his mind racing through the implications. Victor had set a trap with only 2 outcomes, both designed to destroy him. But there was a third outcome Victor hadn't anticipated. Capon had shown mercy by saving Karen Burke, proving he still had humanity. And now he would show ruthless justice for the conspiracy, proving he still had power. Victor had miscalculated which side of Capon Maurizio was more dangerous. 1 week later, Karen Burke walked out of Detroit General Hospital on her own 2 feet, Nikki's arm wrapped protectively around her shoulders. That same evening, Capon Maurizio called a family meeting at La Corona Nera. The private dining room filled with the hierarchy of his empire. Captains lined the walls, their faces impassive masks. Soldiers stood at attention by the doors, hands folded, eyes forward. The air was thick with tension and unspoken questions. Everyone knew something significant was about to happen, but no one knew what. At the head of the table sat Victor, the Viper Castellano, confident and smirking, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand. He'd spent the week spreading whispers among the captains. How the boss had risked his life for a civilian, how sentiment was making him weak, how the organization needed younger, stronger leadership. He believed he'd successfully painted Capon into a corner. Capon entered last, his footsteps measured and deliberate. His bandaged forearms were visible beneath rolled-up sleeves, a reminder to everyone of what he'd done. He sat at the opposite end of the table from Victor, his black eyes scanning the room with the cold precision of a surgeon selecting where to cut. "Gentlemen," Capon began, his voice calm as still water. "We're here to discuss loyalty." He placed a manila folder on the table. Then another. Then a third. His fingers tapped the top folder once. Recorded conversations between Victor Castellano and Marcus Webb. Financial transfers, $50,000 to the Northside crew through a shell company Victor controls. Testimony from Danny Kellerman and Rick Torres, currently enjoying our hospitality in a warehouse on the east side, detailing how Victor gave them permission to operate the arson scheme in my territory. The room went deathly silent. Victor's smirk faltered. Capon opened the final folder, revealing photographs of Victor meeting with Webb and the Northside crew leadership. Proof of conspiracy, racketeering, and attempting to orchestrate a coup within this family. Victor shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly. "You risked your life for some waitress's mother." His voice dripped with contempt. "You proved what I've been saying, you've gone soft. Real bosses don't play hero for civilians. Real bosses, Capon interrupted, his voice cutting like a blade, know the difference between mercy and weakness." He stood slowly, his presence filling the room like gathering thunder. "I saved Karen Burke because it was the right thing to do. Because power without humanity makes us animals." His eyes locked onto Victor's with devastating intensity. "But you mistook mercy for weakness. You thought compassion meant vulnerability. So let me show you the difference." Capon nodded once to Gio, who stepped forward with two other enforcers. "Traitors," Capon said softly, "always receive power. Never mercy." Victor's face drained of color as Joe's hands clamped down on his shoulders. Within a month, the Northside crew was dismantled, their operations absorbed or destroyed. Marcus Webb's real estate empire crumbled under investigations that Capon's political connections mysteriously expedited, fraud, tax evasion, bribery charges that would keep him in federal prison for decades. And Victor Castellano simply disappeared as traitors always did in their world. The message was clear. Capon Maurizio could save a life one day and end another the next. That was true power. 5 months after the Riverside fire and the silent reckoning, Detroit had a new, complicated understanding of Capon Maurizio. He was still the most feared man in the city. His ruthlessness had been proven by Victor Castellano's abrupt disappearance. But he was no longer a man of pure, frozen calculation. Something fundamental had shifted in the heart of his empire. Karen Burke had recovered fully from the smoke inhalation. Capon arranged for her and Nikki to live in a new, safer building rent-free. The old Riverside apartments were eventually rebuilt, not into Marcus Webb's condos, but into modern units with impeccable safety measures, offered back to the original tenants at protected rates. Nikki no longer waited tables at La Corona Nera. Capon hired her to manage a new suite of community outreach programs, youth centers, scholarship funds, and building safety inspections, all operating quietly under shell organizations, but funded entirely by the immense wealth of his operation. Every Sunday evening, Capon's black town car stopped outside the Burke residence. He would sit at their modest dining table, silently eating dinner with Karen and Nikki like a long-lost son. Karen, treating him with the same fierce love and lack of fear she showed everyone, often called him Sonny, and scolded him gently for working too hard. Nikki, vibrant and whole, had become the daughter he never knew he needed, bringing warmth into the rooms that had been dark for 15 years. As Capon left one Sunday night, he paused outside the building, observing a new bronze memorial plaque installed for the fire, listing the names of those who helped and Karen Burke as miraculously saved. He touched the ring he always wore, the one etched with the name of his younger brother, Dante. For the first time since the night Dante died, Capon Maurizio felt the heavy silence of the city as peace, not emptiness. The city believed Capon had found his humanity in the ashes of the fire. But Nikki knew the deeper truth: he never truly lost it. He just needed someone to believe it was still worth saving. In the act of saving her mother, he had finally granted himself redemption, saving his own soul from the cold, ruthless flames that had been consuming him from the inside for 15 long years.